Thank you. Folks, I'm a distinguished principal engineer. I'm with the Office of the CTO. I have three major jobs. They all revolve around security. One is internal, the InfoSec committee. We kind of maintain internal practices within Extreme Networks for proper security. That includes a lot of the things I'm going to try to cover in this presentation. Secondarily, I'm a member of the PCERT, which handles incident response. And then I also run an engineering team, which guides our products to increase their features and overall security. So without further ado, let's move forward. We're going to try to do a quick overview of the threat landscape. Pretty easy agenda. We're going to do the current challenges, emerging threats, education, and then I'm hoping to wrap up with policy and practices. Given the time slots, I'm not sure I will have enough time to cover everything, but I do want to make sure, Ron, that we do have a copy that can be distributed to all, because there's a lot of good advice that can be implemented, particularly in the policies and practices.
Let me just reiterate one comment. All of the slides are going to be available for download and give me a day or two. Plus, we will create individual videos of everyone's presentation. We'll share that for Ed to post on the Extreme site. We'll also post the same videos, separate, like 10 different 20-minute videos on the Angel Beat YouTube channel.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. So given the fact that I'm not that good looking, I'm going to cut my video and then we'll move forward. Okay, so with the agenda, let's move forward to the current challenges. This was taken out of VMware Global Security Insights report. Verizon, VMware, they all have very good threat reports that you can look at to kind of get a view of the landscape. I picked VMware this year because I thought it was very pertinent. Obviously COVID has changed the attack surface. We've distributed ourselves. We're working from home. I'm working from home right now. Many people have gone back to traveling, so they're working in different cities, things of that nature. And ironically, a lot of the cubicle space is not being repopulated. People are finding that they're very functional in this way, and that there's no need to sit, in a cubicle. But the point is that it has created a change in the attack surface. Given the fact that the attacks are more sophisticated, we're getting an increase on home working type environments being hacked, and the attack volumes have had an overall increase. So I'm not going to go through these stats. I'm basically going to talk to the slides rather than read the slides. So let's move forward. So top breach causes. Okay, ransomware, obviously up there. Third-party applications, vulnerabilities, supply chain vulnerabilities, open system type of vulnerabilities. That's a big significant piece as well. Native OS vulnerabilities, things like within Linux or within Windows, that's there as well. And then a big part, out-of-date security technology and processes, and that's going to be a big piece to what I'm going to talk about in this session. The good news is the recognition for a need for a shift, okay? 41% have updated their security policy and approach to mitigate risk. That's a good sign. 61% agree with the view to look at security differently due to the attack surface expansion. And there's a better awareness of tracking data and securing the data itself, because that's, after all, what the attackers are after. They're not really after your physical assets. Although in some narrow instances, they may are looking to wipe and destroy. Usually they're looking to exfiltrate the data and then put it on the dark web and use it for revenue. So this is a good trend. We're starting to see some changes in awareness. People are starting to realize that they have to be more holistic in the way they embrace their security practice. And I'll talk about that later. Current challenges and interesting trends to watch: increase in supply chain attacks, increase in botnet activity within the IoT, ICS, OT space, and ICS means industrial control systems. OT means operational technologies. Again, I don't mean to bang on the drum, but home networking is creating blind spots. And if you don't have the right technology solution to cover your home networking individuals, that could be a point of vulnerability as well. The supply chain attacks we've heard about, but also we're seeing a ransomware insurgence as well. And we're also seeing, some some rather nefarious tools known as Cobalt Strike and Evil Grab. Cobalt Strike is basically a reconnaissance tool. Evil Grab is just what it sounds like. It grabs, associate passwords, accounts, hashes, whatever they can do in order to gain, authorized access and administrative access into the system. And these two, when used in combination, can be very, very dangerous. As a matter of fact, these two were used in the SolarWinds attack. Emerging threats. So we're not done yet. Emerging threats, we're going to see more of the same, but with innovation, because we have to realize that these organizations, which are known as advanced persistent threat groups, they have budgets, they have money, they are organized, they have meetings, and they have reports of progress and things of that nature. And yes, they are paid. So this is something that we have to realize is that landscape is changing. Some of these groups are becoming very, very well funded. We're also seeing ransomware being increasingly used in IoT and ICS attack vectors. I will talk about that later. Also, the rise of ransomware as a service. And this is where you, as an individual, let's say you want to attack somebody, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to write the code. You can go up and sign up to Conti or sign up to Black Matter, and there's a few others that I'm not listing for brevity, but you can go up and you can pay them a service, and they will provide the ransomware code for you. They will provide the ransomware delivery for you, and it's basically ransomware as a service type thing where your code expertise really can be quite minimal to launch a successful attack. Another thing is that exposure is increasingly being viewed as more lucrative than just encryption. So now what happens is, rather than encrypting your data, well, they'll encrypt your data, don't get me wrong, but rather than just encrypting your data, they will take your data and they will hold it, and they will say, hey, I'm holding your data. I'm going to expose this information if you don't pay me. And the reason why this is being viewed as more lucrative is because they can do a repeat on it. They can come in and they can say, okay, I have your data. Boom, you pay them. 6 months later, they come and they say, hey, I still have your data. If you don't pay me again, I'm going to post this. And it's become very successful, and some people have paid. Supply chain attacks will continue, and they will occur in increasing frequency. And ironically, I made this slide deck, a couple months ago, and actually, supply chain attacks have increased in frequency since. So that's very true. Nation-state actors are becoming much more active, and again, this is touching on the advanced persistent threat groups. Russia, China, Ukraine. All of these countries. In some countries you wouldn't think about, like France, United Kingdom, even here in the US, we have advanced persistent threat groups. So they are all over, and they're becoming much more active. Critical infrastructure is also becoming a very active target. We're talking about critical systems like water distribution, gas, power grid. So it's going to get interesting. I talked about IoT, OT, and ICS earlier. These are going to be used as targets, and that's where the critical systems come in, the three that I mentioned earlier. These APTs are targeting this in growing number. They're becoming much more active.
Hey, Ed,
yes.
Sometimes your voice seems to cut out a little bit. Could you just make sure you just stay close to the microphone so we can?
Absolutely, no problem.
That's much better.
Excellent. I am talking fast, so I apologize about that. So here are the three reasons why IoT, OT, and ICS are key attack vectors. Typically, they are very lightweight systems, and they're based on Linux or VxWorks, okay? And they typically have low and focused CPU power limits and security capabilities, as well as low memory as well. They're designed to do what they do. And the devices are typically difficult to patch. Okay, so really, when you look at these three pieces, they make IoT, OT, and ICS very much key attack vectors. And I'm just going to touch on the two bullets at the bottom of the screen. 3 minutes to hack an IoT device, 6 months to discover the breach. Those aren't good numbers, folks. So IoT is very vulnerable, and you need to make sure that IoT is segmented away from your user domains, away from your data centers. Make sure they're as isolated as possible. from your enterprise environment. You should almost treat them as if they are hostile elements. And I don't mean to be too explicit on that, but you really do have to treat them with some degree of suspicion. And it's all about zero trust. So let's do a little ransomware 101. This is a look at the annual ransomware damage. And by the way, that number is pretty accurate. We hit that. As a matter of fact, we topped 20 billion in 2021. If we look at the different perspective of ransomware, we can see that there's a couple trends that are important to note. Our first version of ransomware was PC Cyborg around 1989. And up until the box where you see Android release and Bitcoin, ransoms really had to be done manually. Okay, people had to pay cash. They had to throw it in a dumpster somewhere, or there was some meeting place, some locker in a bus station. That's the way it was done back then. Once we hit 2010 with Bitcoin, cryptocurrency came in. This became the ideal way for ransomware and the ransoms to be paid. Also note that that coordinated with the Android, and shortly before that, I think 2007, the iPhone release. This increased the actual footprint of attack. So the increase in BYOD, bring your own devices, and IoT, people bringing in IoT devices, personal devices that they may have, that has created a vast increase. And you can see that the versions of ransomware have increased, with DarkSide and WannaCry being the latest that I'm highlighting. But quite frankly, this is a very limited list. If I filled all of the ransomware on the right-hand side of the slide, I would fill up the slide. I wouldn't have enough room to list them all. So this is an example of some of the trends that we're seeing with ransomware. Now, there are the traditional methods of attack, phishing or water holing. And that's where someone sends you an email with a malicious attachment or a link. You click on it. The other thing is with a malicious website, you go there and you basically have your C2 infrastructure and encryption. And then obviously at that point, your files are encrypted and data is inaccessible. But the botnet factor is something to take a note of, which I mentioned earlier. Mirai isn't the only IoT botnet that you should be worried about. There are many, many out there. And given the fact that IoT is based mostly on Linux or VxWorks, these are OS systems that can host botnets fairly well. And WannaCry, is not over yet. That's something that we're seeing as well. Many of these ransomwares are being improved, just like we improve code for our customers and our products for our customers. They do the same thing. They improve their code either for themselves or for their customers. Think of ransomware as a service. So we see a new and improved Mirai, 11 new exploits. We know nation states are entering the picture and starting to use the kit, bringing the total to 27. And yes, ransomware is among some of the new exploits. So this is getting serious. They're starting to go from just something that created a denial of service attack to something that really, really can be a very serious botnet that can infect your environment and maybe even put you in the press. So just a quote from Palo Alto about IoT and Linux botnets. They're going to continue to expand, and the attack surface is basically expanding, and they're going to leverage on it. And there are many tools that they will leverage, including many of the ones that I've mentioned up until now. I want to talk a little bit about social media. This may not sound like cybersecurity, but I really think it needs to have a focus. We're seeing increasing trends of misinformation, disinformation, and it's causing social division and instability, which I don't think is very good. And I want to just kind of highlight, we have our real events, which is the true information. Then you have misinformation, and that's someone that's heard something, and perhaps they misunderstood it, and they gossip chain type thing where they repeated it, but they didn't get it correct. But then there's intentional. This is disinformation. This is malicious. This is where people are intentionally feeding you false information. And by the way, that's a big part of social engineering. And we're seeing increasing censorship and labeling in politics because of the pandemic, and trolling, and all the other things. This stuff that the attackers are using, the advanced persistent threats, they're using. And if they can guide you down a path and get you to do something and socially engineer you to do that, then they basically half the battle's won. So remember, humans are psychological beings, so it's important, really important, that we start to understand the impact that technology is having on the human psyche. Okay, we really have to start taking the focus on that rather than just blindly staring at our phones. We have to really start, being cognizant to what it's doing to our internal psyche. I'll get off the soapbox now. Okay, education. Okay, user education, big thing. Most users are not educated in security, and a big thing you can do is educate them. Here at Extreme, we create educational videos. We have quizzes and scoring, so we don't have you just watch the video. You have to take a test afterwards to make sure you understood what you watched. We do internal staged phishing campaigns, and we track, okay? So if we find clickers, we come back to them and we say, hey, we noticed you clicked on a few of these things, and here are some of the things that are wrong. And then if we get repeat clickers, then we'll put them back into training with educational videos, things of that nature. So it's a constant thing that we're doing internally within Extreme to make our users, because you got to remember, not everyone's an engineer. I happen to be a cybersecurity engineer. It's what I do for a living. Many of our folks are marketing people. They're sales reps. Their focus is not necessarily in security. So it's important to get them to be aware of it. Users need to be educated regarding the organization's security policies, the proper use of resources, the proper considerations for applications and data, and then knowledge of the regulatory requirements that they may be bound to, not only within their company, but within their particular job position. And then a big thing on code developers. We've started a program where we're educating code developers to proper coding and secure practices. And again, that's quizzes and scoring. And then we're also releasing internal papers and guides for hardening of systems, things of that nature. So that's a big piece of this. Second piece is your security operations team. As the cybersecurity actors become more sophisticated, security teams need to be upgrading their game as well. So they need the new tools, the new techniques, and they need to be understood. Having better knowledge of the attackers, their tools and their methods, internal wargaming applications, focused hacking on different applications. A big part of what I do is hack our own products, or try to hack our own products. I'm not often successful, thankfully. Increased knowledge of offensive security techniques. And two groups I want to mention is OWASP, Open Web Application Security, and then CEH, which is Certified Ethical Hacker, which I am a member of CEH. I'm also a member of OWASP as well. Use of communities and groups, CIS, CSA, and MITRE ATT&CK. And I'm just going to take a minute to go through those. We have CI security controls, critical information security controls, basic foundational, organizational, and it basically breaks out different control groups that you can implement, and it's a very good guiding set of principles that you can create a security posture around. So I recommend this group very highly, and they do have an IoT version as well, and they also have little code books that you can download off the web, and all of this is free. All of this is available to you. Just go up to the website that I'm showing, and you will find a trove of knowledge as far as implementing a proper security posture. Cloud Security Alliance, I'm big on this. We obviously, as Extreme, with our focus on cloud, we are a major member in Cloud Security Alliance. This is a great group to promote the security assurances within cloud computing. So, whether you're using our stuff in the cloud, whether you're putting your own stuff up in the cloud, CSA is a great alliance to be involved with, and it's a great bunch of folks. And you get a lot of good, proper practices that keep you in compliance when you're working with cloud. So this is a good group as well. MITRE ATT&CK. Now, this one is my favorite, actually. I mentioned earlier that you need to know your attackers. Well, this is where you get to know your attacker. It's basically a taxonomy, and it basically creates a matrix where you can map advanced persistent threat groups to the types of malware they will use and the tactics, techniques, and procedures that they will use in order to infiltrate you. So it can work in a number of ways. Let's say you're interested in Koehler, which is a Russian hacking group. So you can go and look at MITRE and look at Koehler and see the malware that they use, look at their techniques, tactics, and procedures, and then you can map out and be aware of the adversary in that fashion. You can also say, okay, I discovered some malware. It's a particular form of malware in my environment. Now you can go up, map it to MITRE, and MITRE will tell you the advanced persistent threat groups that use that malware. And from there, you can map to the techniques, tactics, and procedures. So this becomes a very powerful way to gain knowledge of your adversary and actually help you create incident response plans. And this is an important piece because you got to realize that an incident response plan for a DOS is quite a bit different from an incident response plan for ransomware, okay, or an exfiltration attack. Okay.
Hey, Ed.
Yes.
Ed, we're at 20 minutes, so I just...
Okay, I'm going to stop here. The next piece would be policies and practices, but that will be provided to all of you folks within the presentation that will be available to you. It just gives good advice on how to implement many of the things that I've talked about up until this point. So I'll hand it back to you now, Ron.